In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America. Welcome to a special edition of the Corporate Couch. These episodes will be more of a love seat that focuses on one topic and will run 15 to 30 minutes. For each special edition episode, you will hear from one or more outstanding leaders sharing their expertise on the most important challenges in corporate America today. Welcome to another special edition of the Corporate Couch. Today we're going to discuss the November 5th, 2024 election and the impact on leadership and how people view leadership in the political parties and how a career in government and politics can transfer into the private sector. And I'm so honored to welcome Joni Wickham, who is, I think she's a fine line between Cupcake and a bitch, I believe. That's the name of her book, by the way. So Joni, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Jeff. I really appreciate being here. And my business partner, Sly James, he always likes to talk about that book title, The Thin Line Between Cupcake and Bitch. And he asked me what side of the line I'm on today. And I always say, it depends on you, buddy.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. So I know a fair amount about you. We've met for coffee, and I've seen you and Sly speak before, but tell the audience kind of a little bit about yourself, and I'll include your full bio in the podcast episode description.
Sure thing. Well, you might detect a little bit of a Southern twang. I'm originally from a tiny little town in eastern North Carolina in the middle of a tobacco field, and had the great opportunity to go to a small all-women's college in Raleigh, North Carolina, called Meredith College, which is where I kind of got the bug for politics and political communication. Started out my career working for then U.S. Senator John Edwards, and oh my goodness, that was quite the opportunity for a 19-year-old, naive but curious young lady. And worked for him for a couple of years, and then moved on to Congressman Bob Etheridge's office. He was the chair of the Agriculture Committee, which was really interesting considering like my my family's farming background. Then I came to Missouri and got my master's degree at the University of Missouri-Columbia. Moved to Jefferson City from there and worked at the Missouri State Capitol for a few years for a teachers union, the Missouri Department of Transportation, and the fabulous Robin Carnahan when she was Missouri Secretary of State. And then in 2011, I moved to Kansas City and got to work for this guy who had a bow tie, very charismatic, very gregarious, larger than life personality, Sly James. And I did not know him at all. Had not had any interaction with him except just kind of following the news when I was still living in Jeff City and working in the state capitol. And he was elected mayor in the spring of 2011. And when I came to Kansas City to interview with him, I wasn't sure his real name was Sly James, because that just seemed a little bit like a Saturday Night Live skit for this trial attorney who went into politics to actually be named Sly James, but that is his actual name. And so we started working together at City Hall, and a couple of years into his administration, he made me chief of staff, and I stayed in that role for about 6 years, which I tell people is where I developed gray hair, high blood pressure, and wrinkles in that job. That's a long time to be in that job. And we left office in August of 2019 and started our public affairs and mediation consulting firm called Wickham James Strategies and Solutions. And now here I am.
I've had the pleasure of interviewing Sly for the full edition of the Corporate Couch and going through his career. And yeah, just a gift. And you guys you both have great presence, but you're tiny physically, and he's kind of the
He's not.
ex ex Marine. He doesn't come off as an ex Marine, but he's
Yeah.
he's bigger in stature, which is a low bar for you because you are very small. But yeah, you make a great team, and I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about that. But let's talk about the November 5th election. So there's been so many kind of call them hot takes surrounding that election. But I mean, I'm sure you have insights that many of our listeners haven't heard before. So what's your take on it?
It was a very consequential election, no doubt, all the way from the top of the ticket, all the way down, as all elections are. Presidential elections, as you know, tend to get a lot of attention because of the high profile nature of those races. But almost every year is some type of election year because you have municipal races and then school boards, which are really important. But this one was really interesting because I felt like it really highlighted how important it is to meet your audience where they are, whether you're a presidential candidate, whether you are a nonprofit president, or even in the C suite of a Fortune 500 company. Knowing where your audience lives, so to speak, and meeting them where they are is really important to success and for communicating your vision. Some candidates did that in this election better than others. There's also a lot of ballot initiatives who the campaign teams on those ballot initiatives have to really figure out how to sell the issues that they're all about to different audiences. So that's also an important part of that is knowing where your audience is and meeting them where they are, and then over time bringing them where they need to be. The election also showed me that leaders have to be very deliberate about focusing on issues that their audiences genuinely cares about. And there tends to be trouble for organizations or political candidates, what have you, when they talk about issues that aren't core to the lives of the individuals, either in their organization, in their state, or in their country. So that's just kind of a couple of insights that I have seen and been able to kind of focus on since November 5th that kind of aren't talked about quite as much as others.
Yeah, I would love your opinion on, for me, and I, I don't take for granted we have the right to vote, so I will vote in every election. But it's so draining the negative. Every campaign seems to be so negative. I would just love your opinion on will that ever change? Because it's not sometimes about the issues so much as just bad mouthing your opponent.
Yeah, we have to become more aware in this country that there's a difference in leadership and politics. Those are two very different things. And leadership is a framework in which you're actually trying to solve problems and make people's lives better. Politics is not so much all the time. To your point about negativity, when we view elections as popularity contests, that's when those types of strategies can be more successful, unfortunately. But when we actually take a step back and think about solving our country or our states or our cities' problems, that's when you can really get back to forming your opinions and voting based on policy, leadership, and problem solving. So that's kind of the pivot that I hope we see in the next election cycle.
I think you and former Kansas City Mayor Sly James, started your company like one day after leaving office after an 8 year.
Literally one day. Yeah.
So I love that. But I'm sure people assume that you just do political consulting, but you do more than that, right?
Yeah, we do. Political consulting is actually the smallest part of our portfolio. We also help clients with strategic communications, crisis communications, public policy work, government affairs. We do a lot of leadership and communication workshops, and we both love to do strategic planning facilitation as well. One thing that we have seen over the 5 years, I cannot believe it's been 5 years since we've left office. Time flies when you're having fun. One of the things that we've seen in the 5 years since we've left office is that our experience in government and in politics has been highly transferable into the private sector. When we were at City Hall, there were days where we would quite literally deal with a murder public works emergencies and try to do long-term planning and try to figure out how to elevate Kansas City on a national profile all before lunch. And so when you get used to juggling all those different priorities at such a high level and under intense public scrutiny, it sets you up to have the mindset that you can do almost anything that you set your mind to do. And it gives you the vantage point to be able to properly advise clients on how to communicate their vision, how to prioritize in an efficient manner so that you can drive results. And it also has allowed us to almost be counselors of sorts to our clients and help them use our experience in these high profile projects to really accomplish the goals that they're trying to implement.
One of the things I love what you and Sly accomplished in Kansas City. So I'm in the suburbs on the Kansas side, about a 25-minute drive from downtown. But I always embrace going downtown. I'm not one, in the Johnson County bubble. I like to get out of it. But I loved so many things you did, obviously with many people involved for the city. So the new airport is magnificent. I interviewed a guest that travels all over the world and came to Kansas City for a conference and told me that it was the nicest airport they had ever been to. I love the streetcar. I enjoy riding the streetcar. It's clean, it's efficient, it's free. The Lowe's Convention Hotel is beautiful. I know you did a lot of initiatives and to make those things and many others happen. But what did you learn, getting those type of projects completed?
First of all, none of the projects that you mentioned, from the airport to the streetcar to the Lowe's Convention Hotel, none of them were particularly politically popular or expedient when we took them on. But we knew that each of those projects were critically important to the city's economy, to creating jobs, to adding vibrancy to our neighborhoods, and that sort of thing. So we had to learn how to establish a longer term vision for the city, which included each of those projects that you just mentioned. And then agenda setting is a concept in public policy where you can either allow others to set the agenda for what you should be focusing on, or you have to lead the public in understanding what type of agenda and what type of vision that you have. So we did a lot of that type of agenda setting where we established our big vision, both in the short term and long term for the city, and had to properly communicate with lots of different stakeholders. Really showed us that open lines of communication are really critical in those big projects. We had to make sure that we were consistently updating the public so that they understood the progress that we were making towards each of those goals. We had to develop trust among each and every stakeholder that worked on the airport and the streetcar and the Lowe's Convention Hotel, because we learned very quickly that when you have trust among the entire team that's pushing towards a common goal, that's going to help you realize those goals much more quickly in a more efficient manner. And we also had to be sure that we were driving towards each of those projects in a very realistic timeline, particularly when you're dealing with public opinion. No one wants to be told that a project's going to be done on Friday, and it's not done for 6 months from then. Like, that's not how you develop trust and are able to tick off more things on your agenda. So I love each and every one of those projects. They were so important. We simply would not have had the NFL draft. We would not be hosting the World Cup in 2026 if it wasn't for the airport, the streetcar, and that convention hotel. So I'm really proud of each of them.
Yeah, as you should be. Anything else you would like to tell our listeners today?
Sure. I would encourage them to go to our website, which is wickhamjames.com. And we have a newsroom that has a lot of really interesting news articles and also videos. But there's also some blog posts that I think your audience might be interested in based on our conversation today. We talk about finding leadership when no one is looking. One of the things that we see in our consulting careers is that often people have they have tunnel vision when they think about what leadership looks like. And they assume that leadership is only running for office, but we know that leadership can look a lot of different ways. And there's often leadership taking place within organizations that people don't necessarily see on a day-to-day basis. So they can find blogs about that. We also talk about how quiet pragmatism can bring people together in an era of shouting and division, which is kind of where we started our conversation today. One of the things we also really enjoy doing is helping teams collaborate and plan for the future in a more strategic manner. And so the audience can also find some tips on collaborating and rallying everyone around a big picture vision at our website.
Thank you so much, Joni, for being on this special edition of the Corporate Couch. You're a gift to Kansas City and a gift to any client that's lucky enough to work with you. So thank you for coming on today.
That's very kind. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you for listening to this special edition of the Corporate Couch. If you enjoyed the episode, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me weekly where I interview great leaders that share their career journey and their leadership wisdom.